Welcome to the Have More Fun podcast.
The difference is we now have a magical device that if you put it in front of a 3-year-old, it's like flipping a switch.
In this episode, I talk with Andy about how to interact with technology without feeling chronically guilty, how to raise kids who are courageous, and he shares great practical tips on how to arrange your life to embrace a rhythm of rest. Hey there. So a few months ago, I had a moment I am not proud of. I had asked one of my beautiful children to turn off the video game device he had been on for the last hour, and he said, okay, but then he kept playing. And the same conversation had happened at least 5 times before this final request, and I was totally done. And so I marched into our family room mid-game, unplugged the game unit from the wall, untangled the cords, and made a scene as I marched it out to the trash can. And my child just sat there with a controller in his hands and his mouth wide open from shock. And I continued to make a huge deal about getting rid of all of our electronic devices because I'm obviously very reasonable and never overreact. But my flip out made me realize that I need a better way to navigate this whole conversation. And when I told my friends what had went down, they reassured me that I am not alone. Because the truth is, we as people living on the globe together right at this moment are pioneering what it means to live with technology. Our grandparents had none of the technological advances we currently have in our homes. In fact, I didn't get my first email address until I was in college. In high school, my dad had one of the first cell phones that had to be carried around with a huge backpack and probably weighed at least 10 pounds. My parents never once had to monitor my social media usage because I didn't have Facebook until I was a parent myself. And here's the truth. We are chronically distracted. Statistics tell us that on average, Americans check their phones once every 12 minutes. And if you're interested, there are a few apps that you can check your own phone usage. One is called Moment, and it tracks how many minutes you spend on your phone each day. And the other is called Checky, Checky, and it tracks how many times you unlock your phone. I've heard on average people unlock their phones 100 times a day. Those numbers are just mind-boggling. I recently read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. In it, he says we're downplaying the problems created by constant interruption. He says we treat it with a general sense of, I probably should be less distracted. But he says it's a more urgent problem than we realize. He says that by letting email and other messages guide our workday, we're weakening our ability to do the most challenging kinds of work, deep work. And he says that deep work requires sustained attention. And we're also denying ourselves the satisfaction that comes from committing our full attention to a task. And once our brain has become accustomed to on-demand distraction, it's hard to shake the addiction even when you want to concentrate. He says that if during every moment of potential boredom in your life, like having to wait 5 minutes in line, or sitting alone in a restaurant until a friend arrives, if we relieve that with a quick glance at our smartphone, then our brains are likely to be rewired to a point where it forgets how to do deep work. Super scary. So we find ourselves in a position where the way we interact with our screens is impacting not only our family dynamics, but our ability to do our work. And I don't know about you, but one thing I'm reminding myself lately is that I will not look back on my life and wish I had spent more time on email or scrolling through BuzzFeed or watching just one more episode of The Bachelor. And don't get me wrong, none of those things are bad. I just want to suck the marrow out of every moment. And for me, that means making intentional choices to do things that bring life and color to my days. That is why I am so excited to talk with Andy Crouch. Andy is shaping the way our generation sees culture, creativity, and faith. He's the author of Strong and Weak, Playing God, Culture Making, and the Techwise Family. And for many years, he was the executive editor of Christianity Today. He joined the John Templeton Foundation in 2017 as senior strategist for communication. His work and writing have been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time, and most importantly, he received a shout out in Lecrae's 2014 single, Nonfiction. What I love most about Andy is that he is filled with wonder and wisdom. He brings light and love wherever he goes, and his thoughts about technology are paving the way and redeeming our family experience in all the best ways. I am convinced that every family should own his book, The Techwise Family, because it is the best book I have read in a long time, and I read a lot. And if you are worried about feeling shamed by this conversation, fear not. Andy is in the business of hope and courage, both of which you will feel after you hear what he has to say. And so here's my friend, Andy Crouch. Okay, Andy, I have to tell you that your book, The Techwise Family, is the most refreshing perspective I have encountered on how to navigate the new digital frontier. We are a generation of parents who are pioneering uncharted landscapes in so many ways. I didn't have my first cell phone until I was in college. I don't think I had an email address till even later than that. So it's just, it feels like we are kind of feeling things out as we go. But what I appreciate about your approach is that it's reframing the conversation in such a healthy way, from focusing on limits to asking, what do we really want? And so can you tell me just a little bit about wisdom and courage? Because those two ideas and how those attributes can help us make decisions for our family really changed so much of how my husband and I think about technology now after listening to you share about it.
Wow, that's so encouraging. Yes, I think limits is a really terrible way to parent, like always thinking about what limits I'm setting. And yet that's what so many of us are preoccupied with these days. And when I started working on this book, consistently people would say, oh, I hope you're going to tell me how much screen time my kids need to have, which is basically a limits question. And it occurs to me that we used to only run into this when my parents were raising me and I was like a toddler or like a 5-year-old. The place where you really ran into this was at the checkout line in the grocery store. There would be all this candy, and it was like this gauntlet that parents had to take their kids through, yes. and keep their kid from grabbing every piece of candy. But that was like 2 minutes out of the week, that one trip to the grocery store. And now every day there's kind of candy within reach. But that's not the right way to start. The way to start is by asking, what is family for? What do I want? Not just for my kids, but for myself. So this is not just going to be about like screen time limits for the kids. It's going to be about how our whole family does our life. And so I just started thinking, well, as Catherine and I were raising our 2 kids, what were the sort of principles behind the choices we made for ourselves and for our children? And I landed on these 2 words that I talk about in the book, wisdom and courage. I think what family is meant to do is make us wiser than we would be otherwise, give us wisdom we wouldn't have otherwise, and then give us courage that we wouldn't have otherwise. So wisdom is, it's something deeper than just knowledge or information. Like you can get a lot of information online and lots of different sources, but where do you become someone who deeply knows yourself, the world, other people, and ultimately God? I think that's what wisdom is. And I don't think we ever get real wisdom without other people. And we also never get real wisdom when things are too easy. All the wisdom in my life has come from things that were various degrees of difficulty, I would say. And it strikes me that all of this technology, the reason we bring it into our homes and put it in our pockets and so forth, is we think, oh, this will make my life easier. And it does do that in certain ways and in certain domains of life. And it's very useful in that way. The only problem is if I want to acquire wisdom, I actually don't need my life to get easier. I need it to get actually more difficult in very specific ways, which we could talk about a little more. And then once I've got wisdom, I need to be able to act on it and actually do things that are hard and even frightening, but that are the right thing to do because they're deeply right. And that's what courage is about. And I think that also happens in family. A family calls us even the most mundane day in family life. My daughter just walked in, came back from school. She's in high school now, had to get a water bottle that she'd left at home and is having kind of a rough start to her day. And like, how do I relate to my daughter as she sort of grumpily comes in the door and grabs the bottle? Like, I can either sort of check out and decide, well, I'll sort of act like I'm busy because I know she was in a bad mood this morning, or I can engage with her. And there's just this little moment of choice and courage. And either I'm going to acquire the wisdom to handle that well, or I'm just going to opt out of it. And she has some of the same choices, right? Every day has these moments. And I'm just afraid that technology that's filling our lives and our homes is causing us to miss these moments that would develop wisdom and courage.
Man, that is so good. And you gave a brilliant example. The classic example of going to the grocery store.
Yes, right.
And how that experience has really changed in a lot of ways over the past 10 years or so, even since my kids were teeny tiny.
Yes, yes.
So share a little bit about that and screens versus no screens and what that experience can entail.
So in a way, the challenge, I think, has shifted. Like for our parents, it might have been getting us through the candy line,
yes,
or
exactly.
the checkout line. But we know, another really tough thing, especially when children are small, is just getting to the grocery store without a total meltdown.
Yes.
On the part of either the kids or the parent. Or, siblings in the back seat with each other, whatever. And this is difficult. And by the way, it's always been difficult. I mean, 3-year-olds have never really wanted to be confined and told where they have to go and so forth. This was true for our great-great-grandparents as much as it is for us. And so every generation of parents has to figure out how to handle these moments where you've got to get something done. You've got to take the kids with you. It's not going to be that much fun for them. Therefore, not that much fun for you. The difference is we now have a magical device that if you put it in front of a 3-year-old, it's like flipping a switch, and they'll be quiet, they'll be compliant, they'll be absorbed, they'll be superficially happy. And, it's obviously a glowing rectangle, as we call this in my family, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or, the built-in DVD player or whatever. And that will absolutely solve your problem that moment. Like it is really quasi-magical. The only thing is that no one learns anything. That is, neither my children nor I in that moment learn how to handle difficulty, learn how to handle the sibling sitting next to me, learn how to handle being strapped into a car seat, going somewhere I don't want to go. But a lot of life is going to involve going places I don't necessarily want to go myself, being with people I sometimes find difficult, especially my closest family members, right?
Yes.
And if I choose today to solve my problem with a magical device, I solve the problem today. But I miss out on both my children and me kind of working our way through. How do we do this? How do we do this in a way that's kind of creative and reasonably fun? And all of our ancestors figured out how to do this. And it was part of what happened in family is you sorted that out. But we've now got a screen that will take care of the problem. And in one way, the problem's out of sight, but it actually has not been addressed at all. The deeper problem of how do I and my children learn wisdom and courage in this very mundane moment of a little bit of frustration and challenge.
And that really goes back to what you were mentioning earlier about really kind of embracing and welcoming more difficult things in our life. Yeah, exactly. And even looking at, so we don't buy all these devices thinking this will help me never have to become a person of courage, or, we don't buy them to avoid developing character. But I think it's because we don't think about the fact that character is often developed in the very simple things. It is the trip to the grocery store. It is what happens when you get in the car. Does everybody plug in the white headphones and just be in their own little happy place? Or do we actually learn, just driving from place to place, how to really talk with each other, how to find entertainment, how to find, as children get older, kind of deeper conversation? And so if we fill what we think are the routine parts of our lives with lots of technology, thinking, well, it's just a routine, it's just a trip to the store, put on the DVD, we're actually missing out on the little building blocks that will actually transform our relationships and our family in such a way that when the really big stuff comes along, for which there is no technology, a significant illness, a major loss, a major transition, there's no devices that are going to handle that. But if we haven't built up the capacity to handle that with the small daily things, we're going to be really limited in how we can face these big things that life brings us together. And it goes with a quote that you mentioned. There's a study where teenagers were asked what was the number one thing that they would like to change about their relationship with their parents. And they said, I wish my parents weren't on their phones so much and would pay attention to me more. And so I've been thinking about this so much because I have 2 teenagers in the house now. And how do you make sense of the fact that the whole goal of technology is to make us more efficient, which in turn would give us more time and margin? But instead, we've never been more distracted or disconnected, right?
Oh my gosh. How did that work out, right? We were supposed to be living the life of leisure by now.
Exactly.
Oh, man, that is such a mystery, isn't it? Like these things that are supposed to make my life easier, they do. There's no doubt they make them easier in some way. But clearly the kind of easy we've been going for and that we've built our devices to give us actually doesn't address what we most want from our lives, right? Mm-hmm. And instead it sort of creeps in and fills up all this time rather than giving me more time. I think it's because the things we really want from life, like we want to be deeply known by other people. We want to experience transcendence together. We want to have moments of just amazing beauty and awe, whether it's outdoors or with amazing art or whatever. But all these things, the capacity for them is only developed through a kind of inefficiency. There's a kind of requirement of a certain kind of wasted time. Here's what I think part of the problem. As your life becomes more and more efficient, you think you need to make every moment like worth it. You get something done. And now that we have these get something done devices within reach all the time, I think we're neglecting the fact that there's something about empty space and about unknown territory that you can't explore efficiently because you don't even know what's there. Like in a conversation with a teenager, I can get things done with my daughter quickly, just get scheduling done or find out what assignments she needs to do this weekend. But what's going on in my 17-year-old's heart and mind? I have no idea. How do I efficiently get to that? I can't. And so if my life is full of efficient interactions with her and with other people through all these devices, I'm going to miss out on just the exploration I have to do of just waiting, listening, asking open-ended questions. And our devices kind of train us that seems boring or scary or difficult, and it might be all of those things, but it's on the other side of all that the real creative life we actually want, that's where that life is going to be found.
Do you see a consumerism mentality that's kind of developing as well, where we always expect to be entertained, which turns into a different culture in our family as well, when our kids are becoming consumers and demanding constant distraction? I read a book recently called Deep Work, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it really, really shook me to the core, thinking about how we're losing this ability to do focused, deep work.
Yes, exactly. All real creativity is on the other side of boredom. So when I sit down, like to write a book like this one, I have to start with a blank page. And the first thing I feel as I confront that blank page, whether it's for the whole book or a chapter or I just had to write a 3-sentence email before we connected here. And the fear I feel as I sit looking at that blank page that asks me to create something, it's the feeling of boredom, like I'm not getting anything done here. I don't know if I have anything to offer here. And the desire to distract myself is so intense. It's just so amazing how much I want to be distracted from that open-ended, uncertain future that's in front of me with any kind of deep work. And we now have the option. I think the only difference between us and past generations is we have the option. To distract away. And so in a way, we don't ever have to be bored because there's always something to flip through in Instagram or whatever. But in another sense, I think we're more bored than we've ever been because actually we haven't developed, and this is true for our children too, right? They haven't developed the ability to entertain themselves. I would complain to my mother when I was a little kid, 6 or 7 years old, I'm bored. And she would say, well, go outside. Well, what is there to do outside? We lived in a rural area. There weren't any friends. There weren't any other kids. Sometimes my sister would play with me, sometimes not. just go out. But actually, on the other side of that boredom, I learned how to entertain myself. In my case, in cornfields and just out in the yard and in the trails that were out behind our house. And I found out there's this incredibly rich world out there. And the kind of person who discovers that then actually becomes you're less able to be bored. You discover there's something there wherever you are to explore. There's something inside you to explore. But in a world that always offers us entertainment, we never get to that discovery. And I think another thing maybe I would want to say about that is that the basic premise of the consumer world, I think you're right to bring up that language, is it says the good things are made somewhere else and your job is just to buy them and enjoy them.
Oh, wow.
As opposed to, no, the best things in your life will be things you will make. It's not the recorded music. It's going to be singing together as a family. It's not watching the football game. It'll be touch football in the backyard. The moments you'll most treasure from your life will be things you actually created. But a consumer culture gives you every reason, every incentive, and often the money available to just purchase experiences rather than actually learning to create them together.
Man, that is so good. And that has a lot to do with skill as well, right? How we're kind of a culture who are losing skills.
Yes, and we sort of willingly, like the devices, all these devices. And as you know, in the book, it's not just about the screens. It's not even just about computers. Even just think about cars. I remember my dad showing me how a carburetor worked in a car, right? Back then, cars had this thing called a carburetor that injected air into the fuel system, basically. Well, the carburetors are long gone. And when I open up the hood of our car, so my daughter got her driver's license last year, and so I thought, well, Dad should show Amy around the car, right? So I'm like, well, let me show you under the hood here, Amy. And of course, it's one big plastic cover, right? That covers this engine that actually is like, there's probably 100 computers inside that thing running that engine that I can't service. I can't do anything to change it. Like literally the only thing I could show her was, here's the windshield wiper fluid. Like this blue water, you pour that in, right? But think about how different that is from a child who could have seen their father like changing the oil or actually doing much more elaborate work on cars. And children used to see their parents, whether it was dad out in the driveway with the car or usually dad with the car, often mom in the kitchen, right? Seeing mom cooking and starting with these raw ingredients and ending up with a wonderful meal. But now when you can just hit a button, our children never develop skill. They don't see us exercising skill. And it's wonderfully easy. And sometimes it's super efficient. But it isn't actually what we were made for as human beings, I think. I think we were made to develop these skills and care for our world. And children want that. But now we just give them simulations of it. Like you can pretend to build something on a screen, but it'll be easier, quicker, and less satisfying than it would be in real life.
You share some just super practical tips for families in how to navigate and kind of situate your living space in order to reframe this conversation around devices. Will you just share what you and your wife made priorities in your home?
Yeah, I actually think like interior design can really help us. So we thought we had a chance to kind of do a reset when we moved to the house we live in now when our kids were small. We've lived here for 14 years now. And we moved in and we decided that the first floor, which is it's a small house with an open first floor, living room, dining room, kitchen, and a little nook with a fireplace. And we decided that we were going to absolutely minimize technological devices in that space where we knew we'd be spending the most time as a family. So we didn't even have a TV for a while, but eventually we did get a television, but it's downstairs. It's in kind of a secondary space. Because we wanted the main living area of our house to be a place where we had to exercise skill and engagement and creativity. So a big chunk of the first floor is taken up by a grand piano. I grew up playing the piano. I wanted my kids to learn that. We had a craft table with lots of art supplies always out. By the way, one of my friends pointed out that part of the reason we like giving our kids iPads to play with is it's not messy. Like you can clean it up like just one swipe of a little towel, whereas when you give the kids art supplies, like we had to have this
glitter everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Oh, the glitter I have vacuumed up like multiple vacuumings. Right. So it is messier, but on the other hand, so much better in so many ways. And so there was always this craft table for the kids, lots of books, a kitchen where we can cook, even electric lights. Like we decided almost all of our dinners would be by candlelight. So I don't know that we do this every single night, but most nights we light the candles and turn out the electric lights because conversations get better, and frankly your spouse looks way more romantic. Like it's like the spouse of your youth. But the kids love it too, and it says this is a special time. So if you actually fill your the main living area, wherever that is in your home, for some families the family room, or whatever, however it works, with things that actually require active engagement, and push the devices and the stuff that just works on its own to the edges of your home, so that you have to kind of intentionally go watch TV or intentionally go check your email. Then something wonderful happens at the heart of your home. It just sort of says, these are our priorities. This is what we're mostly going to be as a family. We want to create more than we consume, and we've kind of arranged our home this way. The coolest thing since this book has come out, I've actually gotten emails from people who are literally in the middle of like remodeling their home or finishing their basement, who have changed. They've totally changed like the way they were planning their home out.
That's incredible.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've written 4 books. None of them has ever like changed how people arrange their furniture. But actually, I think that's the level of change we need, because these devices, otherwise, they are so easy and they're so inviting. They're designed to be easy and inviting. Like thousands of person hours have gone into engineering this thing to make you want to use it and to make the colors bright and make the interface really, really simple. So we've got to actively decide, I'm not going to fill my home with those things, or at least the center of my home is not going to be filled with those things.
So good. And I will tell you, I told you before we hopped on this call that I sent a video you did to my husband. And so our TV's leaving our family room as of tonight. So
wow.
You are revolutionizing
parenting
across the world, I feel like, with your advice.
And by the way, I'm all for enjoying entertainment together, but the more that we can make it intentional and it's somewhere you go and you decide we're going to sit down as a family and do this. And
it's not a default.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's about changing the default setting. Basically, all of our technological life comes with the wrong default settings. It's designed to be always on. We're not designed to be always on. We're designed for rhythms, right? It's designed to be easy. We're actually not made for easy. That's not the best for human beings. So we just have to change the settings in a way and use not in the way the manual, not according to the owner's manual.
So in resetting that default, you guys have really made some intentional choices around healthy rhythms with technology.
Yeah. That
I thought was just brilliant. Will you just share what your rhythms around technology are?
Yeah, we have sort of a simple pattern, and it's the basic idea is we human beings are designed for a rhythm of work and rest, of engagement and disengagement. And so we want our devices to honor that rather than overriding that. So our pattern has been 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and 1 or actually often 2 weeks a year. We basically turn off everything that has an off switch. I mean, I don't go into the basement and like throw the master circuit breaker, though I'm tempted sometimes. And I mean, think about when you have a power outage, how actually wonderful that is for a little while. It's obviously very inconvenient at length, but like if you had a 1 hour a day power outage, think of all the amazing things that happen.
It is kind of magical what happens.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So kind of literally, that's why we turn out the lights at dinner time and light the candles. It's like you can have your own mini power outage anytime you want. So for us, it's dinner time. For that hour, we plug in all the glowing rectangles, in a central place away from the table. Just let them have their little meal of electrons, and we'll have our meal undistracted by devices, out of reach turned off, and then one day a week. So for us, this is Sunday. We have no screens really. Saturday night we shut them. Maybe Sunday night we open them just to kind of plan for the week. But we've got a full 24 hours with really no devices kind of taking up space and time. And then we are very fortunate as a family. We're able to plan a family vacation every summer. Have done ever since the kids were 0 years old. And we turn it all off during that time, and maybe we use an iPhone to like check the weather, but like we radically minimize it. I turn my email off entirely. I put an auto reply message when I leave for vacation that says, "Unfortunately, I will never read your email." And people can almost not believe it. They're like, "Well, but you read it when you come back, right?" I'm like, "No, I never read it. It goes into an archive, and it creates such a sense of freedom and ability to really be present with my family during these incredibly precious moments where mom and I are not working, and I can just be with the kids." So 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, 1 week a year is a great rhythm.
That is awesome.
The other thing I might add is I've become totally convinced that phones in bedrooms are a terrible idea, not just for children, but parents as well. So then also overnight, we put our phones to bed before we go to bed, and they don't sleep next to us.
Oh my gosh. Yes, totally agree. Even just the electromagnetic field that phones give off.
And the distraction field and the you're going to be needed field. And I really, 80+% of teenagers sleep with their phones next to them. And I know exactly why. It's because this has become the way that especially teenagers stay connected to each other. But the problem is teenagers, in order to have healthy relationships with each other, need a break from the intensity of like high school and emotion and, drama, right? Mm-hmm. And literally, most kids are getting notifications all through the night because their friends are up. They wake up in the middle of the night, they answer, they like someone's Instagram. Yes. And that is not a way to have a healthy rhythm. There was a study in the UK just a few months ago where they asked actually students, high school students, what they wish their parents would help them with technology. And a lot of parents, for very good reason, are concerned about sexual content and inappropriate content. But the thing that the kids themselves, the teenagers themselves wanted help with is they said, it's interfering with my sleep and my parents don't even know that it's interfering, but I really need help because I'm not sleeping because I have this glowing thing buzzing and waking me up. And we know how hard that is for us as adults to resist that stuff. Imagine being 15 years old trying to manage all that by yourself in your bedroom at 2 a.m. So no phones in bedrooms. That's become our just ironclad policy. Really, since I started writing the book, I realized this is not helping. Even my having it distantly next to me on the bedstand, just take it out.
Send it to the kitchen. You have to get like a regular alarm clock.
Yes. So there are still alarm, quick, before all the alarm clocks disappear, buy like a $8 alarm clock and you're good.
Okay. So I'm on a quest this year to have more fun. I have spent my entire life trying to check off my to-do list and then thinking that the fun would happen, only to realize that the to-do list is never ending.
That's right.
So I am curious how you incorporate fun into your everyday life.
Wow, what a great question. It all depends on what you find fun.
Yes.
But I think the two things, are you asking me personally or our family more?
You personally.
Yeah. So I love food, and happily, 3/4 of our family, this would be my wife, my daughter, and me, my son would be a little different, are pretty skilled at cooking and love to cook, bake, all that stuff.
Okay, so time out. Your son is not a skilled chef.
Is
that what?
No.
He has other skills that are...
He has other delights.
Okay.
Yes, but the preparation of food is not high on his list.
That's fair. Totally fair.
He's survived to 20 years old and is able to feed himself, but there's not the same creative capacity. But one of the other three of us will cook, and I will say, just enjoying like the process of cooking, and then eating and what happens to flavors. So that would be one like daily fun, I would say, for us. And it's not elaborate stuff. We don't have time for that, but on a daily basis.
Even just the process of creating, I feel like,
Yeah.
super cathartic.
Yeah. So the next thing that I do is I really make it a priority to get outside at least once a day. And there's all kinds of fun out of doors that this is one thing about our world of screens. I mean, the screens are very engaging, but they're kind of draining. Like the more time I spend in front of a screen, the more depleted I feel almost always. Whereas even 5 minutes outside. And so I have to work at a screen. My work is all done through devices. And I think devices are good for that. But on days when I have writing to do or whatever, I'll build in breaks where I just walk even just around the block. And then, of course, I try to be outside for longer if I can. And the most amazing things happen. Like there's 2 foxes in our neighborhood that have never been here before, or at least I never saw them. And so I go out every day now and I just like look for the fox. And most days I don't see the fox because it's good at hiding. But every once in a while I see a fox. And I'll see a raptor or a big bird in the sky. And I mean, this is maybe my threshold for fun is very low.
No, I am with you. I 100% agree.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, this is amazing. And this is maybe a detour a bit, but in the course of writing this book, actually, I realized that what I was doing in the mornings when I got up, so our phones don't sleep with us, they're downstairs. But I would get up and I'd start my tea brewing, and then I'd pick up the phone right away and start scrolling through things. And I thought, this has got to be the wrong way to start my day. And I decided that I would not pick up my phone until I had been out of doors. And we live in a house where it's not that hard to get out. It's not like we live in a big apartment building or something. And so I've changed my pattern now. And every morning, the first thing I do, or at least, I still make the tea first. I make the tea.
Priorities, yeah.
But then I go outside. And some mornings, like it's winter as we're talking, and, it's like 0 degrees outside. I'm like, oh, it's cold. And I go back in. But other mornings, I just linger outside, like in the dark of the dawn, and look at the sky, look at the stars. And it's just reawakened this capacity for wonder and stillness that is so hard to find in the rest of my day. So I don't know if that counts as fun, but
absolutely,
but it's deep enjoyment for sure. Yeah. Now the other thing is I find cleaning unbelievably fun. So we may not have this in common, but actually, like if I can have a chance to clean something, I'm so happy. So like the dishes or vacuuming or whatever. So that's the other way I have fun, but that may not apply to everyone.
Have you always been like that, or is that like as an adult, or as a kid, was your room like neat as a pin? And
it wasn't. And my wife says I should have like advertised this quality before I got married, because it would have made me so much more like eligible prospect.
Seriously.
But I've seriously discovered, and I mean, Catherine, fortunately, is very grateful for this. I do just delight in getting the house clean, and it is sort of my therapeutic thing that I do. And Catherine cooks more often than I do, but I do the dishes almost every day. And there's something about getting that kitchen back to square one and back to sort of neat. Oh, it makes me so happy. So if you want to do a follow-up podcast about cleaning products and like the best cleaning products for every surface, I'd love to do it.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. Okay, I have one final question that I love to ask all my friends, and it is, what is the best advice you never got?
Oh, wow. I think, maybe I did get this advice at some point, but what I sure wish I had heard a lot more often from people I could trust was, don't be afraid. I spent too much of my life, especially, it's different now. I mean, I'm 49 years old now, and I think I've really learned not to be afraid, but I spent so much of my teenage years and my kind of early adult years and my early marriage, I would say, afraid of risk, afraid of so many things. And I mean, life has been harder in some respects than I ever imagined, and worse things than I ever feared have happened around me, I would say. I've had kind of a charmed life. I'm not sure that a lot of terrible things have happened to me, but certainly with people I very deeply cared for and in the midst of communities that I was part of. And so like the worst actually has happened closer to me than I ever feared maybe, but it's also been so much better than I thought. And life with God, life in the way of Jesus, life with the friends that I've been given because I'm following Jesus, life with my wife, with my children has been so much better. And it would have been even better if I had taken more risks earlier and not sort of backed off. So it's interesting to me that when angels show up in the Bible, at least in the New Testament, every single time they show up, the first thing they say is, "Don't be afraid." And I wish that I had that kind of on repeat in the years when there was a lot of future ahead and a lot of uncertainty ahead. And I wish someone had just said, "Fear not, the Lord is with you." That would have been good.
That is revolutionary and remarkable if we can truly own that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So
everything changes.
So good.
Wow.
Andy, I am continually inspired by you, your wisdom, your beautiful heart. I love how you appreciate wonder and how you intentionally make it a priority in your life. And I just am so grateful for your book. It is changing the fabric of our family. And so I just couldn't be more grateful for the work that you offer the world and the way that you live your life as a beacon for us all. So just entirely grateful for you.
Wow, well, that's very kind, Mandy, and thank you so much for taking it so seriously and joyfully and gratefully. There's a lot of good out there for us, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to visit mandyarioto.com to access the show notes or to leave me a message about anything we talked about today. Now go out and have more fun, and don't come back until you do.